I loved Banjo-Kazooie, but I didn't love Yooka-Laylee. Instead of conjuring memories of the heyday of 90s style 3D platformers, it underscored why they may have gone extinct in the first place. And now Yooka-Laylee are back to try it again, but this time with a change of perspective and using a different game as a source of its inspiration, being Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. And Yooka-Laylee in the Impossible Lair isn't exactly shy about that fact, bearing many similarities. Now, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is, in my opinion, one of the greatest side-scrolling platformers ever created. So how can the Impossible Lair possibly compete, considering it was made with a fraction of Nintendo's budget and the manpower? Is it going to embarrass itself in even trying? Well, that would be a pretty rude introduction to the review if so. So let's just get it out of the way. Not only does Yooka-Laylee in the Impossible Lair not embarrass itself, but it even manages to one-up Tropical Freeze in a couple of interesting ways, while introducing some fun twists all of its own. So let's dive into what Yooka-Laylee in the Impossible Lair does right, or maybe wrong, as we compare it to Tropical Freeze way too many times. And the comparisons are nearly impossible to avoid, because at its platforming core, Impossible Lair is nearly indistinguishable from Tropical Freeze, sharing a similar weighty feel, controls, and even moveset. Which is to say, it all feels really good, as should be expected when you're aping the best. Yooka has a great sense of momentum, allowing precision control even at top speed, whereas Laylee takes on the partner role, granting an extra hit, while also permitting you to get some extra hang time by spinning in the air, which is something you'll definitely miss if you lose her after taking damage. But in a neat twist, you actually have a brief window of time in which you can try to get Laylee back as she's frantically flying around, Baby Mario style. It's a super clever risk versus reward mechanic, as you weigh the odds of trying to get her back at the risk of dying entirely by taking damage while doing so, especially since her flight path can be a bit erratic. Of course, you can always get her back by ringing one of the Laylee bells scattered about each level, which is the game's version of a DK barrel. So yeah, the controls feel great and are super responsive, which is a very good thing as the level design frequently put them to the test. Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair, as it turns out, isn't easy, but it rarely feels unfair. The levels were clearly built by those who understand the craft, which let me tell you is pretty refreshing after coming off Super Mario Maker 2. And even though they can be tough, I never found myself frustrated by them, which is partially in thanks to a generous checkpoint system and the complete removal of lives as a concept. You're able to retry as many times as it takes, and the reset is nearly instant too. And hey, even if you find yourself completely stuck, the game will eventually offer to let you skip ahead to the next checkpoint. Isn't that nice? Like with Tropical Freeze, the 40 worlds here are brought to life with surprising realism, at least as realistic as a cartoon lizard and bat can be. Point is, you're not going to find any magical floating platforms here, as most every object has some contextual reason for existing. Whether it's wooden platforms suspended by rope in a forest, or the machinery of an active factory. It all feels remarkably grounded, while also offering some of the best platforming I've experienced since, you guessed it, Tropical Freeze. But while Tropical Freeze is renowned for its countless large-scale set pieces, like traversing a freaking tornado, Yooka-Laylee takes a bit more of a classic approach, but one that's still built around highly active and dynamic environments. Whether it's treadmill platforms or Ferris wheels that shift under your weight. There's always a lot going on, and I love that it kept me on my toes, rather than me sleepwalking through it as I've been able to with the more recent 2D Marios. Now, although the environments of the 40 levels here are pretty varied on the whole, you will find yourself exploring some pretty similar looking areas a bit more often than in Tropical Freeze, with buildings such as this being the most egregious. Now, beyond running and jumping, you'll also want to keep an eye out for two main types of collectibles. First are the 5 secret coins hidden in each stage, and second is a constantly replenished supply of quills, which is the game's main currency, both of which I had a lot of fun collecting. The former because they're often cleverly hidden and usually require some challenging platforming to get to, which is incredibly unlike the repetitive bonus rooms of Tropical Freeze, while the latter are just fun to pick up, especially since they're offered as a reward for completing mid-level ghost riding challenges. Yeah, this guy barfs up a storm of them and I love it. And part of the reason why I found the collectibles fun to find is because they're also meaningful, allowing you to unlock additional levels in the case of the coins, or purchase tonics they found in the case of the quills, which can then be equipped to augment your skills or looks. By default, you're able to equip up to 3 tonics at a time. Some are just for fun, like this rad Game Boy filter or this creepy humanoid version of Yooka, while others can adjust the difficulty of the game itself, such as granting more invincibility time when hit, or giving enemies googly eyes, which also give them an extra health point each. But beware, as any tonics that affect the difficulty will also affect your final quill count. with easier ones subtracting from your total, while harder ones will actually add to it. It's a neat way to moderate difficulty, albeit at the risk or reward of your quill count. Now, while the bulk of the game is based around 2D platforming, Yooka-Laylee haven't completely abandoned their 3D roots, and it's all thanks to a shockingly in-depth hub world that you'll explore between stages. Although it may be visually similar to the world map from Super Mario 3D World, it offers a much deeper experience, featuring light platforming, Zelda-esque puzzles, various NPCs, and tons of secrets to uncover. I went in expecting a mindless time waster, but what I ended up with was something that I enjoyed nearly as much as the platforming itself, which is a very good thing considering you'll probably spend around a third of your total playtime in the hub world. And not only does it act as a refreshing break between platforming challenges, but it's fun to explore in its own right and unravel all of its secrets, including how to access about half the levels. Because while most of the levels, which come in the form of open books, are easily found out in the open, each one of them is hiding a secret second stage, which requires you to solve some kind of environmental puzzle in order to access it. For instance, covering this book with water will cause the level itself to flood, whereas spilling honey all over this one will saturate nearly every surface with sticky goo, allowing you to stick to the walls Donkey Kong Country 2 style. It's a brilliant idea, and I love discovering how to change each world and what effects it would have inside it. Oh, and in case you're concerned about these variations coming across as a cheap way to extend the gameplay, don't be. Functionally, they might as well be entirely different stages. Now, the overworld is sectioned off by pay walls, as in literal walls you have to pay to have removed. Pretty clever, huh? But don't worry, as no real money is required here. Instead, you'll cash in the collectible coins found within each level. And these paywalls help create a wonderful interplay between the world map progression and the in-level exploration, lending the collectibles a real value for discovering them. Now, each section of the overworld generally has 3 levels defined, which you can tackle in most any order, along with numerous puzzles, NPCs to talk to, and secrets, which lends a quasi-sandbox approach to each area, which made the game feel a bit more open, even if the overall adventure is still mostly linear, but not entirely, as there is one major aspect of the game that isn't really linear at all, at least in terms of accessing it. And paradoxically, it's the final level, aka the Impossible Lair itself. Because, in a brilliant Breath of the Wild style twist, you can attempt to tackle it at any point in the game, even before you've played a single normal level. The only thing standing in your way is your own skill, and a lack of health. Because, as you might expect, this level is long, brutal, and, well, basically impossible. So Yooka and Laylee are going to need all the help they can get, and that help comes in the form of the Beetalion Army. Yes, that's right, an army of bees. And you'll find an individual member of them at the end of each level. Together, the Beetalion Army acts as a shield, or more specifically, HP, allowing Yooka and Laylee to absorb an extra hit for each bee that you find. So the more levels that you beat, the better chances you'll have against the Impossible Lair, and of course the final boss. But look, if you want to go in completely defenseless, there's nothing stopping you. It's a super cool idea that makes completing each level feel just a little bit more special, and when taken together with a 3D hub world, truly helps Yooka-Laylee and Impossible Lair stand apart as more than just a mere Tropical Freeze clone. As if that'd be such a bad thing. Whether you're platforming or exploring the overworld, the presentation remains stellar throughout. Heck, even the title screen impressed me. That book looks freaking real, darn it. The animation is also fantastic across the board, with the Queen Bee being a particular standout. And I love some of the little details throughout the game, such as how rocket pack wearing enemies barrel toward the screen whenever they're defeated. The lighting effects are especially impressive, going well beyond Tropical Freeze, with far more dynamic and colorful light sources. You'll even see the various characters cast real-time shadows onto the background. The only downside to the added realism is it does have the slight side effect of making it a little bit harder to discern enemies at times, as the lighting can make them blend into the background, though it's rarely that much of an issue. Performance-wise, the frame rate is nearly a rock-solid 60 frames per second, with only occasional hiccups that are over in a flash. The soundtrack is also consistently great and perfectly befitting of each level's setting. I almost always found it a pleasure to listen to, which is to be expected when you have both Grant Kirkhope and David Wise involved. But that being said, with maybe just a handful of exceptions, the tracks here never quite reach the insane heights of Tropical Freeze's soundtrack, and take on a slightly more subdued role. I also encountered an odd issue where the music would occasionally stutter when moving between areas. It's always brief, but it does stand out when the presentation is otherwise stellar. All in all, Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair really took me by surprise, offering one of the best 2D platforming experiences I've had since Tropical Freeze. While it may not always reach the ridiculous heights of that game's varied worlds, dynamic set pieces, and killer soundtrack, it nearly makes up for it with bang-on controls, splendid level design, great music, collectibles that are fun to find, and a fantastic world map that can almost serve as a basis for its own game. It seems Playtonic really took the lessons it learned from the first game to heart, and purposefully dialed back the ambition in order to deliver in terms of substance and quality. And I couldn't be happier that it turned out as great as it has. I liked Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair a lot, and I can't wait to see where the series goes next. Yooka-Laylee racing, anyone? And with that, thanks for watching, and of course make sure to click the subscribe button and ring that bell for tons more on Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair and everything else Nintendo Switch as well. We'll catch you later. Bye.